Now back to our main topic today. Vladimir Putin is again using scare tactic against the West rather than pursuing peace with Ukraine. Are we back at square one despite Donald Trump's hopes that peace remains within reach? Our guest to discuss the latest on this is Stephen Moore of the Ukraine Freedom Project. Stephen, thank you for joining us tonight.
Adam, always great to be with you.
Thank you. So how seriously should we take Putin's threats of attacking Western troops if they were to secure peace in Ukraine?
You know, Putin has been threatening everything for a long time. And there's United 24, the Ukrainian media outlet, has done a great piece on all the threats that Putin's made. If Ukraine gets F-16s, then Putin's going to go nuclear. If Finland joins NATO, Putin's going to go nuclear. If, you name it, then Putin's got these nuclear threats. He never keeps them, which is, good for those of us who spend most of our time in Ukraine. And I think that, this is just part of Putin's negotiating strategy, is that he makes maximalist demands and he makes maximalist threats. And, and then he's rarely follows through.
But what we've seen in Paris when this coalition of the willing met, yesterday, and also what we heard from even Donald Trump, it seems that some of his threats are falling on deaf ears these days. The West is just forging ahead with their plans.
Yeah, I think that, there was the coalition of the willing in Paris, and then there was this other meeting in Beijing of every bad guy in the world. In fact, the only one that was missing, according to your reporting earlier, was Viktor Orban. And, and so I think that you're seeing the battle lines being drawn. The Polish people know the same thing that we know, when those of us living in Ukraine, and most of the rest of Eastern Europe knows, is that we're in a global war right now. And the bad guys have just had their planning meeting, their strategy meeting. They've been acting on this information that we're in a global war for several years now. The West, the Americans, much of Europe has not been acting on this information. So I think there's showing this clarity, of who's where is, I think, really important.
Does Trump understand this finally? Because, he admitted as much in this short clip we played earlier, where he said, I thought it would be easy, but it turns out ending this particular war isn't. So he was also very critical of the meeting in China, just as you mentioned. So is he sort of coming to a certain position that is going to strengthen the Western resolve overall, if you would comment on that?
Yeah, so Trump's having a learning process here, and and he's got the same obstacle that Biden had. Biden had this strategy of escalation management, where they slowly managed the escalation of this because they were deathly afraid that Putin was going to use, and again, Putin has threatened that many times. But if Biden had let Ukraine be as aggressive as they wanted to be in 2023, you and I would not be having this conversation right now. So Trump's got to go through that same learning process, and he's doing it. And
but doesn't, excuse me,
see him sort of like.
Excuse me for interrupting you, but in a sense, Trump bears some responsibility for that, because he was telling Biden all the time that he was going to cause World War III and nuclear holocaust. And he stopped the Congress from passing the bill on Ukraine support for months.
No, that's not accurate. I was there. I was in the middle of that. And what happened was that the pro-Ukraine Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, passed a $300 million aid bill for Ukraine, and 7 members of the Republican Party, 7 pro-Russian members of the Republican Party, stood up and said, let's vote the pro-Ukraine speaker out. And every Democrat in the U.S. House of Representatives joined with those 7 members of the Moscow caucus of the Republican Party and voted out the pro-Ukraine Speaker of the House.
Okay, but remind me, did Donald Trump try to convince these 7 members to vote along with Stephen McCarthy, or did he let him fall?
I don't recall Donald Trump being involved with that terribly. And again, I was there. As I recall, Donald Trump was pretty silent at that time, and frankly, could have blown it up at any time. If you look at what happened with Speaker Johnson for the next 6 months, Donald Trump could have blown that up any time with one single tweet, but he didn't. So, again, Speaker Johnson put his job on the line in April of last year as the third most powerful American to get that aid bill passed.
Right.
And, and again, the Democrats were no help.
Right. From where you are in Ukraine, how does Ukraine view the developments of the last few days? Is this something that they are encouraged with, or are they increasingly concerned?
Well, Adam, the Ukrainians are just like you. They're getting dizzy from their head spinning from Trump saying one thing and saying another. And as I've told people since the Trump first term, is if you try to follow and if you obsess about everything Trump says every day, you will develop a dependency on anti-anxiety meds and good Polish vodka. So, you have to kind of watch the trajectory. And the trajectory we're on is really good. And that is that, Vladimir Putin, here's the fundamentals. Vladimir Putin is the irresistible force of wanting to take over Ukraine and all of Eastern Europe. And Donald Trump is the immovable object of wanting peace in Ukraine. Now, whether that's peace that's just or whether that's peace that's lasting or, whether it's just because he wants to get a Nobel Prize is a bunch of other questions. But nonetheless, those two things cannot exist in the same space at the same time. So, there is going to be a point at which Donald Trump loses patience. And, and I think we're close
to this point where he loses patience?
What you tell me, would you say that Donald Trump, would you characterize him as a patient man?
Well, I put so many wrong bets on this that I don't volunteer to make another. I leave it to you.
Yeah. Listen, I think that, and here's the secret weapon that Ukraine has, Melania Trump, right? The woman that shares his bed tells him every night, and here's how many drones that Putin launched into Ukraine today. And
yeah, she even helped him today understand the question from a journalist, right?
Listen, it pays to have an Eastern European in the White House. That's all I'm saying. So,
and that's a good line.
So I think that we're getting there.
Yeah, and that's a good line to finish on. Stephen Moore, Ukraine Freedom Project,
Great.
Thank you very much.
Adam, always great.
This was World News Tonight. Thank you for watching. And stay on for Face to Face with our Editor-in-Chief, Michał Broniatowski, who will share his insight into this week's top events. Good night.